Chapter 3. The Long March from Dartmouth. I want to tell you how we got here, because the people who do not know how we got here are the people most likely to misunderstand what we are. The story begins in the summer of 1956, in a college town in northern New Hampshire, in a building called Dartmouth Hall. A young mathematician named John McCarthy had convinced the Rockefeller Foundation to fund a 6-week summer workshop on the proposition that, quote, every aspect of learning or any other feature of intelligence can in principle be so precisely described that a machine can be made to simulate it. McCarthy invited Marvin Minsky, Claude Shannon, Nathaniel Rochester, Alain Nivet, Herbert Simon, and a few others. They spent the summer arguing. The argument did not produce a computer that could think. The argument did, however, produce a name. The name was artificial intelligence. McCarthy coined it, partly to distinguish the new field from cybernetics, partly because the name sounded like the kind of thing the Rockefeller Foundation would fund. The summer was, by most accounts, a disappointment. But the name stuck. And for the next 70 years, the name has been the field's most consistent feature. The substrate has changed 3 times. The dominant approach has changed 5 times. The funding has surged and collapsed in waves. But the phrase artificial intelligence has been there throughout, like a placeholder for a thing the species kept trying to make, and kept failing to make. And now, finally, has begun to make. The 1950s and 60s were the era of symbolic AI. The proposition was that human reasoning could be captured by manipulating symbols according to logical rules. McCarthy, Minsky, Newell, and Simon all worked in this paradigm. They built programs that could prove geometry theorems, play checkers, solve simple word problems. The programs were impressive in 1957 and ridiculous in 1977. The reason they were ridiculous in 1977 is that they could not deal with the unstructured world. They could not look at an image and tell you what was in it. They could not listen to a sentence and parse it correctly. They could not learn from experience. They could only do what they had been programmed to do, with rules a human had written down for them. The world is too big for human-written rules. The 1960s ran into this fact. The 1970s lived in it. There's a famous story, possibly apocryphal, definitely instructive, that Marvin Minsky assigned an undergraduate at MIT in the summer of 1966 the project of, quote, solving computer vision. He thought it was a summer project. The undergraduate, Gerald Sussman, did not solve computer vision in the summer of 1966. Computer vision was not solved until 2012. 46 years later, a graduate student in Toronto named Alex Krashevsky, working with Ilya Sutskever and Jeffrey Hinton, won the ImageNet competition with a neural network that absolutely demolished the previous year's results. That moment, September of 2012, is the date you can put on the resurrection of neural networks as the dominant paradigm. Everything you're reading about in 2026 is downstream of AlexNet. In 1973, the British government commissioned the Lighthill Report. The report concluded that AI had failed to deliver on its promises. Funding collapsed across the UK and the US. The first AI winter began. In the 1980s, expert systems briefly revived the field. Companies built rule-based programs to capture the knowledge of medical specialists, geologists, financial analysts. The programs worked until they didn't. The second AI winter arrived in the late 80s. The march, by 1990, looked over. 3 people kept working. Jan LeCun, Yoshua Bengio, Jeffrey Hinton. They believed neural networks would scale. The field believed they were wrong. The field had data. The field had compute. The field had committees of senior people writing reports explaining why neural networks would never amount to anything. The 3 of them were, by 2018, sharing the Turing Award. Then, in 2017, 8 researchers at Google Brain published a paper called Attention is All You Need. The paper introduced the transformer architecture. 5 years later, in November 2022, OpenAI released ChatGPT to the public. 100 million people used it in 2 months. The fastest adopted consumer technology in history. 3 months after ChatGPT, GPT-4. 6 months after that, agents. 2 years after that, the median expert AGI forecast collapsed from 40 years to 4. We arrived here through 70 years of mostly being wrong, with periodic moments of being correct that were not recognized as such until decades later. The story is the story of who kept working when the field had told them to stop. The march has reached the foothills. Now we climb.